Hare Krishna to everyone. So today's session we will take up shloka number 3.38. In the last shloka, Krishna has just begun to tell Arjun about this very strong hidden enemy of ours, which is lust, which is born out of the mode of passion and degrades into the mode of ignorance by being converted into anger. So what more does Krishna tell Arjun about this lust? This is going to be a reveal series. First let's say the prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjan Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, today's shloka tells about how lust attacks a living entity. Just like an enemy army attacks the camp of its enemy, you see, the attack is generally carried out in stages, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then ultimately the entire camp is taken over. So let's imagine lust to be that kind of an enemy, and it starts by attacking to a little extent, goes on further, and till the last when it completely covers the living entity's consciousness. So now when we talk about lust covering our consciousness, what does that exactly mean? First, let's read the shloka and then let's try to understand. So the shloka goes, Dhumena vriyate vahanil yatha darsho malena cha yatholbena vrito garbhas tatha tenedam avritam. Now if we read the same shloka with word meanings and sing it in the same way, it is going to read something like this. By smoke is covered fire, just as mirror by dust also, just as by the womb is covered the embryo, so by that lust this is covered. Now what does the this in the last line stand for? This in the last line stands for the living entity, the soul, the individual soul, which is a part and parcel of Krishna. And this gets covered means its consciousness gets covered by the lust. Lust covers the consciousness, thereby pulling a curtain in a way that the knowledge is obscured. So the translation first by Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. So these are the 3 stages of lust attack. I think we can somewhat comprehend the severity of the covering. See, when smoke is covering the fire, as compared to that, let's imagine a mirror covered with dust, and yet one more comparison of an embryo covered by womb. So as we proceed with the examples, we see that there is an increasing complexity of coverage, which means the covering gets thicker and thicker, by the example. Now let's take up the first example, that is when smoke covers the fire. You see, when we in the beginning start to light up the fires, when we try to kindle the fire in maybe firewood or coal, we have to blow hard, and we've all had that experience sometime, giving some kind of starter also. And initially we see there is more of smoke than fire, but eventually as we blow harder, the smoke is dispelled and the fire starts to blaze brightly. If I think all of us must have attended some havan at some point of time. So initially we see a lot of smoke emanates, and because of that smoke we can't see the fire. But as the smoke dissipates by blowing upon it, then the fire starts to blaze brightly. Now this is actually an analogy to say that initially the attack of the lust on us is in a minute way, in a subtle way, so that we are covered by lust to some degree, but our desires are not that strong, and a little help from outside, a very little effort from the jiva, from the soul, as well as a little help from outside can actually do the trick of banishing away the enemy. We can just simply banish the enemy by doing that. Now fire here refers to our original consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So a Krishna conscious entity can revive its original consciousness of being a part and parcel of Krishna by making little efforts, like by hearing Krishna Katha, by hearing the scriptures, and also by chanting. So by making this effort, what happens is that the enemy from stage 1 only is pushed back, and we can revive our consciousness. So this stage has been compared to the humans. Now the humans have a higher degree of consciousness. We can see around us, humans are more responsive, more conscious of themselves, more conscious of their surroundings. So because they have a higher level of consciousness, that is why the human life is the only life in which one can actually, fight with this enemy of lust, somehow banish it from its life and regain his original glory of that of being a part and parcel of Krishna. And in fact, we find amongst the humans also the degrees of consciousness vary. And if we go back to the scriptures, we hear the example of Prahlad, the son of Hiranyakashipu. Now he was, though born in the family of a demon, what we see is that the consciousness was Prahlad from the birth was very, very elevated, right? And in the womb, when he was, given the sermon by Narad Muni, who is a very elevated devotee, so his whatever covering of lust he had on his consciousness was dispelled. And when he took birth, right from the birth, he was a very, very staunch devotee. This is how we can compare it to many people in our society also these days also. We see that there are some people who come to devotion very easily, only by attending a few sessions of Bhagavad Gita, or only by chanting for some time, they immediately, come to this process of Krishna consciousness very naturally. Now the second example is given, that of the birds and the beasts, the consciousness of the birds and beasts. Now we see that the birds and the beasts have lesser consciousness level than the humans, but more than the plants. So in this case, it has been compared to the covering of the dust on the mirror. So sometimes you see, obviously it will depend upon how thick that layer of dust is. You may not even be able to see the mirror. If there is a very thick layer of dust, you will not be able to even see the mirror, let alone see your own image. So for lifetimes and lifetimes, we have been collecting this, so many anarthas we have been collecting, and that's the reason why the lust may form a thicker to slightly thinner layer. But whatever the case, a person cannot see one's image in the mirror if it is covered by dust. So in this case, that person will have to go and make that effort of getting a cloth, or maybe get some, spray like Colin to spray it and then clean it nicely, scrub it clean. So in this case, the effort is going to be more, right? And thus it has been compared that people who have lust attack to stage 2 will need to make more effort to dispel this lust enemy from our consciousness. So this effort may involve doing, of course it involves doing chanting, reading the scriptures, the Bhagavatam, etc. But apart from that, this will also include doing more and more austerity. Austerity means some kind of tapasya, keeping fasts, etc. So more effort is required, right? Then the third level of the consciousness, or the attack of the lust on consciousness, is compared to the embryo inside the womb. Now we all have been there, yes, although we don't remember it. Now it's a very well talked about matter in our scriptures. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, all the feelings that an embryo undergoes inside a mother's womb have been described very nicely. And contrary to what the modern world believes, the embryo is not really very happy inside, right? The embryo is very much conscious of its precarious position, sitting in the dark room, constricted room, and in the later stages upside down. The embryo is actually praying to Lord to set him free. So, however, can the embryo do something to come out of his plight earlier than the designated time? We all know that there is a gestation period, and one has to wait for the gestation period to be over, and then only the embryo will come out of the covering. The covering of the womb will be removed only after that. Similarly, in some cases, the living entities have a very, very deep lust attack, to the level that the consciousness is covered to such an extent that the individual soul cannot do anything to overcome that covering, to abolish that covering. Just like in the plants can just stand around doing nothing. So they have to wait for that time period to be over for them, right? Then only automatically, in the manner of the soul's evolution, they will move on to the next species of life. And similarly, we can actually liken it that they can do nothing but to wait for the Lord's mercy to happen to them in due course of time, and then only they can move ahead to the next level. So you see, you might have heard about the story of Nalkuver and Manigriv, or the Damodar Leela. In the Damodar Leela, we see Nalkuver and Manigriv, who were Kubera's two sons, who had been actually made to stand in the form of trees by Narad Muni for years and years. Because, if you remember the backstory, this happened because when he was passing by the Mandakini river, these two gentlemen were bathing in the river without any clothes on, with some ladies, and were so drunk that they did not have the decency to put on clothes when Narad Muni was passing by. And therefore they were cursed by Narad Muni to stand like trees, because a person having such a low level of consciousness, and which means doesn't have the decency to cover up when a gentleman is passing by, must go and live his life in the manner of a tree. And that's why, which actually brings us to a very important observation here, that why a living entity is today standing in form of a tree is probably not to do with what the living entity has done in this life. It has to do what the living entity has done in the previous lives. If they indulged in uncontrolled sense gratification in the previous lives, then the living entity will have to spend time in the form of a tree, which cannot express itself because of consciousness covered deeply by lust. So you see, these three examples show us the level to which a living entity may be attacked by lust. And to sum it up, I will just recite a poem, and in this poem we sum up the teachings of Krishna in this shloka. So the poem goes like, lust is a veritable foe that attacks in steps 1 to 3. With every step, increasing effort is needed to get free. First is the smoke on fire. That is a covering flimsy. One just needs to blow. By hearing and chanting, one is free. Next, as the mirror is covered with a consciousness hidden under layers of lust, laid across lifetimes, it needs more time to wipe it clean with austerity and grit. And finally, as the embryo waits in a mother's womb for the time to come, a soul ridden by uncontrolled desires can only wait for the Lord's mercy to unfold. So much for today. Thank you so much for being with me. We will see in the following verses how lust exactly controls us, where does it sit, and how we can control it. So please be with me. We will meet next time with shloka number 3.39. Hare Krishna. Until then, please chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and be happy.